So novel technologies, the future of industrialization. We're going to be discussing this matter at this round table. A few years ago, digital technologies, new technologies were YouTube, Uber, Netflix. The topic raised by Robert Gordon consisted in saying that these new technologies will not serve industrialization or even growth. So we'll start with this paradox. Are new technologies today something different? What are they? And how can they support or encourage industrialization and in the long-term economic development? What do we have at stake? Digitization in general, new technologies. Will they increase productivity? And what gains in productivity will take place in the industrial sector more than in other sectors, for example, like services? That's the first major challenge. Second challenge, we have this technological revolution. Is it a source of economic development? Will it lead to growth and economic development throughout the ecosystem? And then finally, we have an ensuing question: what public policy should be introduced to support all this? If we can prove the positive answer to the first two questions. So, what can economists tell us about these challenges? First of all, we have to bear in mind the fact that the distinguishing between industry and services is a false idea for all sorts of reasons. Industries can outsource a lot of their production, and this can then appear in the accounts under services or other industries. And these new technologies actually mix together the dividing line between industry and service, because the industry of the future produces services as well. That's the first important point you have to bear in mind. When we talk about industrialization, we're not talking about making a car, but all sorts of other sectors too. Second point that I want you to bear in mind. The share of industry in GDP in France is quite low. It's about 11 to 13%. Industrial full employment is 10 to 15, 12%, 15 for Europe. Some industries, however, account for a lot of R&D. 60% of R&D takes place in industry. So what counts is not so much the share of industry per se, but to what extent it shores up the whole ecosystem, will be a source of growth in other sectors. And third point, we'll talk about this later on. This is something economists say quite loudly. Policies of the future will not resemble the policies of the past. We can't choose an industrial champion that states should then finance. That would be a major nonsense. But governments must help institutionally to build up this ecosystem, for example, through standards, a flexible regulations, and support for innovation, research, and training, so special forms of teaching. So these are the major challenges which we'll look at in greater detail. Thank you very much, Maya. That was very clear. 60% of R&D takes place in industry, whence the importance of new technologies in industry. And the other highlight, I think, in what you said is the fact that the border between industry and services, well, you can find this in the INSEE figures, but the border keeps shifting. There's industry and services in industry. I'll very briefly introduce our panel. We have the honor to welcome Doris Berghofer, who is president of Siemens. That is a huge industrial group. She's the boss of activities in France. Mathieu Flamini, some people knew him in a previous existence. He is an outstanding entrepreneur and industrialist. He is the boss and co-shareholder of GF Biochemicals, We'll talk about that later. Philippe Maillard is the boss of APAV, which is a leader in risk control in industry. Just a minor anecdote, the APAV group is a group which is some years old now. Gustave Eiffel, when he made the Eiffel Tower, asked APAV for expert advice as to whether what he was building would weather time or whether the workers would fall to earth because the beams wouldn't hold up. So it's a very important industry. Jean-Marie Mognetti, you're also an outstanding entrepreneur. It's an amazing story, that of coin shares. Here we're talking about cryptocurrencies. You are the boss of a company. Well, it's a bit complicated. It's listed in Sweden. It's located in English. You're French, but anyway, it is a leader in. It's a management company which specializes in cryptocurrencies, and we'll see this later. It has a link with industry. Jacques Pomereau, we know you well because the group you run is called Inetum. Everyone has heard of GFI, less so Inetum. It's a very big group. I think it's called ESN now. It provides advice in technology in many different countries, 28 countries. Thousands of engineers work for industry. You lie at the heart of services and industry. And then on my right, we have Jean-Luc Robert, who is the president and CEO of Kiriba, which is a wonderful adventure. Kiriba is the first French unicorn. It was set up in the 80s. Now we're in 2023. And it's one of the biggest French fintechs. I don't know whether you define yourself in that manner. Kiriba is a dashboard that companies, whether they're big or small, can use, and it will tell you, thanks to a special SaaS software, it will tell you where your cash stands. And cash is of paramount importance given the number of crises we've just weathered. It's very important in the industry. Doris, I'll give you the floor, perhaps, as you are really a huge industrial group, Siemens. For decades now, you have done a lot of R&D. Could you tell us today where things stand? Do you have the feeling that things are speeding up? And you might give us 2 or 3 examples of technologies which are revolutionizing our industry today. Thank you for the invitation. The Siemens Group was created 175 years ago. Well, apart from Saint-Gobain, you are one of the leaders, one of the oldest companies. 70 billion euros turnover. 10% is spent on R&D. That is over 5 billion euros. That's quite a substantial sum of money. We have 300,000 employees, half of whom are in Europe, and we are active in 3 main sectors: industry, infrastructure, and transport, responsible for 75% of world emissions. So what's our role, our part? To bring the real world and the digital world together, make them converge in order to meet the challenges of our society today. Now, what does this mean? We take real assets, buildings, plants, electricity grids, and we're going to connect them in order to use the data and do the right things with these data, analyze the data in terms of compliance, and then do more complicated things like predictive maintenance, for example, or go even further and create digital networks. Could you explain to us what this means? It's cropped up often in our conversations. Could you explain to us exactly what a digital twin is? Well, for example, before you build a plant, you can create a digital twin. You can create the buildings and the production lines and simulate them. And this makes it possible before you even put the first machine in the plant. This enables you to see how you should align the various production tools, how you should bring them into service, how you should repair them to make sure things are secure for employees, to enhance productivity as well. Then you install things, and you can constantly optimize using artificial intelligence. There's some wonderful examples of this. It's not futuristic, it already exists. We need to give time for all the speakers. A huge group. Well, it's quite impressive, the figures that you've given us. Siemens is a gigantic company, kind of mastodont like that. Can it really innovate? Or is it only small structures, startups that can do so? And we have a certain number represented here. Are they more nimble? How can you create a link between these two worlds? We deeply believe that this can only work in an ecosystem. We have created a platform called an accelerator. It's a digital platform. The idea is to onboard partners, including startups, which are nimble and which can innovate, and then we co-create solutions together. That lends visibility to these startups vis-à-vis our customers, and it makes things move faster for our customers. So there's great complementarity here. I only very briefly presented your company. Could you explain to us exactly what you do? You're an industrial startup. You're 100% industrial, 100% startup, and what you do is probably very complicated, but it's readily comprehensible. How do you work with the big industrial groups? Good afternoon, everybody. We talk a lot about reindustrialization and about the energy transition. I'd like to talk to you about an industry that's not very well known. It's called petrochemicals. Petrochemicals, what's that? Well, shampoo, deodorant, household cleansing products are based on oil derivatives. Now, of course, we're embarking on an energy transition. We have regulators who regulate these products from the petrochemical industry, and then we have the consumers, people like me who know more and more about what's happening and who want to use daily products that are more sustainable and safer. With biochemicals, what we do is to replace these ingredients from petrochemicals, which are oil derivatives, by biosourced ingredients. In agricultural waste, for example, we work with big groups in chemicals, and the idea is to make safer, more sustainable products using all these derivatives. You provide advice to the big groups. You're involved in their R&D. Are you co-owners? How do things work? Well, we began 13 years ago. We're not as old as Siemens. We are pioneers, I would like to say. We are innovators, challengers. Our core business is technology. We have about 150 technologies on different markets. We produce biosolvents, for example. We produce products for cosmetics. These are all your clients, yes. We work with big groups so that they can speed up this energy transition, and the idea is to have more sustainable, safer daily household products. Thank you very much. Philippe Maillard, a few words about what you do. I summed up things in a simplistic manner. So you have 1 foot in services and 1 foot in industry. So what do you think about this border, this dividing line between industry and services? People say you need to reindustrialize, we depend too much on services, or vice versa, etc. Well, thank you. Good afternoon. We are over 150 years old. We're a bit younger than Siemens. It's interesting to bear in mind our history. Industries in the Mulhouse area asked engineers to guarantee two things: that industrial production, mainly based on steam, would be able to work, and at the same time, this would not endanger the health of the workers and employees in the plant. That's our history. For 150 years, we've been working with industry as it has evolved over time. The idea is for people to be able to safely go about their work. We provide support, we inspect, we control, we ensure standards and norms are respected, regulations, be they European or national, or even voluntary regulations. The goal is to build trust and ensure that I can buy this product in a trusting manner because it's been tested and checked. I can use or enter this or that building or school because it has also been checked. So this confidence is very important. We've been doing this kind of work for the last 150 years. We are at the border between industry and service. You employ only engineers, yes, engineers, technicians in all different areas. I'd like to share 2 points with you. First of all, we talk a lot about digital and the digital risk. Everyone is thinking about the digital revolution, which has an impact on everyone, including industry. But don't forget that today there are technical challenges, major ones. Do you think that a big airplane manufacturer knows how to store hydrogen in a plane? Do you think that not far from here at ITER, we're trying to reproduce solar fission? Do you think that we know how to do this? Well, technology is evolving. Techniques are evolving. We're studying and developing these new technologies. Engineers, startups, and big groups are doing all this work. And it behooves us to support them so that all this can be done in a very safe manner. I think it's very important to recall this. Let me give you another example. Hydrogen. Do you think that hydrogen is an easy thing? People talk a lot about hydrogen. The hydrogen plant entails certain risks and hazards, so you can't do this in any old way. You can't use this in any old context. So we have to provide this kind of support. Qualify the risks, define the risks. It's important for the entire ecosystem. We have a single goal. We want to ensure that all these transitions, the digital, environmental transitions, take place in a world based on trust and in a safe manner. Well, this does fascinate me indeed. You have supported many industrial revolutions, and your function, your mission is still there. And in Mulhouse, one can wonder about steam energy. Same thing for hydrogen today, in fact. Not to mention mini nuclear power plants. Well, these mini nuclear power plants, well, there's an industry that is in bad odor, which people sometimes say is dangerous, namely cryptocurrencies. You are the king of cryptocurrencies. Tell us about it. You're not 150 years old, but history has speeded up a lot. We have cryptocurrencies. In comparative terms, you are it's almost as though you're 100 years old. Cryptocurrency is something new in finance. Here we're talking about an industry will really end up shifting to cryptocurrencies completely. It's a vast subject, but you have just 2 or 3 minutes. It would be interesting to hear what you have to say because you're at the heart of this revolution. Well, yes, it is true that we are in bad odor to a degree, but I'm not a big bad wolf, and what people say that this ecosystem began in 2008 with the subprime crisis, when some people said it was necessary to find a solution to change the status of things. We had to find an asset management system that would enable the man in the street to have a democratic access to this new product, not just It shouldn't be just for an elite, but for everyone, to put this in a savings plan and make the most of these cryptocurrencies. These products, I'm talking about ETFs, or the equivalent of ETF in Europe. These are products which have created the most millionaires in terms of investors since they were introduced in 2015. It's a complicated crown to wear. We could talk about this with the boss of Amundi, or we could talk about this with the Central European Bank. What one notes is that people often say cryptocurrency is something negative, but you have to look at the industrial underpinnings of all this. First of all, you have the financial side of things. All the people here today are saying that this new industrial revolution is bound to exist, but the financial system is 1.0. We talk about 4.0, but in finance we're talking about 1.0. The systems are still based on old versions of things which need to be updated, and things aren't moving forward. Companies today are trying to enter the digital era with old solutions, particularly in terms of financial services. We have this blockchain technology, and that makes it possible to automate things more. Things can be more transparent, more centralized. So it's a technology which has been used increasingly in industry in terms of authentication. Yes, look at government projects in R&D. There are projects to decentralize the land registries, also banks, in terms of the creation of values. How can you issue a financial product through the blockchain? Société Générale has a huge project in this area. Thank you very much. Sorry to cut you short. It's my unfortunate task to have to ensure that people stick to time. I'm the timekeeper. Jacques Proudhon, don't introduce yourself. I wanted to give you the floor. You lie at the heart of industry because you work for industry as a services company. Tell us about the technological advances, the right technologies. We've talked about digital twins, for example. What awaits us in the future? What have you observed? What did your missions focus on today? We have 27,000 engineers, developers, experts who work in a number of countries for industry in particular. I was thinking about the title of this discussion, New Technologies, Future of Industrialization, and I thought to myself, well, one should talk more about incorporation. Without new technologies, the industry won't have a future. Let me explain why I'm saying this. We have a number of customers today, and what we know is they want to roll out massively artificial intelligence. We'll talk about this later. But above all, data. What are we witnessing? We have a big plane manufacturer, a manufacturer of turbines, which use data on a massive scale. That's the case of Siemens, too. There's a very strong development in robotization. Why? Tesla is succeeding so beautifully because robotization, the extreme robotization, provides for gains in productivity. And if you visit a conventional thermal engine car plant and electric car plant, they have nothing in common. In terms of industry, what we observe currently is the rollout on scale of augmented reality. These glasses which enable you to make a digital twin, and this makes it possible to speed up maintenance, speed up training, and boost productivity. In terms of digital twins, just to wind up, what about the role of the state? In the building sector, buildings also often have a digital twin. The penetration is 5 to 10% of buildings in France, buildings and plants and so on. In China, it's 100%. Why? Because the government has made it obligatory some years ago to have a digital twin as soon as a building is designed. The new revolution, and I do say revolution, is generative artificial intelligence. I'm not talking about an incremental progress. I'm talking about something that's truly revolutionary. Thank you very much, Jean-Luc Robert. You are a bit like Jean-Marie. You have revolutionized financial services with a technology which was a revolution in terms of software and the cloud. You develop rapidly in this area. Will there be incremental leaps like this? What about artificial intelligence? I agree with this entirely. We were created in 2003. We enabled companies, whatever their size and whatever their geographic area, to manage and optimize their cash, their investments, their working capital fund, and optimize their working capital. We have lots of customers in different fields. We have Siemens, GFI, Tesla, Amazon as customers. And this is a SaaS function. You can connect very quickly to a service which we manage, and you have to register, of course. You have to subscribe. We lie at the heart of the technological revolution. We have these new technologies, NFTs, cryptocurrencies, artificial intelligence, the idea being to optimize all these scenarios. Artificial intelligence helps to improve this service as well. Yes, the quality of service and the functioning, the simulations. Leaders, people who work in the financial departments can thus take very quick decisions on an almost instant basis. Well, technologies have a cross-cutting role to play. They lie at the heart of the whole of this sector: petrochemicals, cash management. I have two questions when it comes to our academic participant. One you can answer quite quickly, and the other everyone can think about. In Europe, are we really trailing behind the Chinese and the Americans, for example? We talked a lot about the Biden plan for AI, protecting the market, and so on. And two, if this is true, or even if it isn't true, what are our governments doing? Should they put up more money? Should they regulate, deregulate? And I would like to ask your opinion on that, of the other speakers too. First point, Europe and the rest of the world. Well, in fact, we have a very good report which gives us all the figures and which shows that when you look at the highest added value industries, you find them not in Europe but in Asia and in the US. There's R&D and new technologies in Europe, but in industries with less added value. So there's a real challenge here. We need to catch up. Why? In the field of digital technologies, there are network effects, cumulative effects when it comes to advances. And if you start to fall behind, well, that's simply not an option. In industry, you can lag behind and then catch up. But here, this is not the case in digital technologies, because digital technologies create a whole ecosystem. They have a snowball effect. It's a technological leap forward. So this is a huge challenge today. Of course, we talk about finding hope again. We must say that we are lagging behind a little bit. If you look at digital matters abroad, if you look at the GAFAM, they're all American. They have a Chinese equivalent, so there is a lot at stake when it comes to public policy. On a European level, I think we need to build up regulations that foster innovation, support innovation, so we have a form of sovereignty and independence in all these areas which are crucial. Thank you, Maya. So, Doris, perhaps, and then we'll let everyone react as they like. But it might be worthwhile to hear the viewpoint of the president of Siemens. Okay, we talk often about champions, but Siemens is a global champion. Do you have the impression that you are lagging behind the Americans and the Chinese?
If you try to look at the glass as being half full rather than half empty, France also faces a challenge, but is also has an opportunity. It's one of the most industrialized countries in Europe, below 50%, while Germany has only lost 20%. So now we can leapfrog technologies and all the new plants that are being built, all the startups can do this, can come back using the new technologies we just mentioned. There's a great example called Chamadex. I don't know if you heard about that. The French president went to visit them in Ardèche a few weeks ago. They're producing sports shoes in Europe again. This no longer existed. They use digital twins, augmented reality, etc. And they're very proud about that because they can be highly competitive in a country such as France. And we support them. So Siemens is also an actor in huge industrial projects like cells with super factories being built in Europe. Does anyone else have a different view, or do you all agree? Or is someone upset with what's happening? We have to find solutions. Well, as concerns fintechs, I believe there's a generation of entrepreneurs in France that is present and which was not present 10 years ago. And we now see some global leaders in the world of, in the area of machine tools, in the area of in the field of artificial intelligence, and we can very well aim towards a leadership position. The public authorities are doing a lot for that. Yes, absolutely. They do a lot. We're not China. We can't use the model of China, which would be difficult to replicate in Europe. We know that the US is a weird capitalism because the state is extremely present, especially through public markets. I would like to know what you feel about our interventionism, knowing that we're not the US either, because we're a more partitioned market. But what is the right method? If you were a minister of the industry, what would be the right method to support the industry? Do we need more money, more regulations, more of a framework? If I turn to those who are not so loved by the regulatory authorities, Jean-Marie, what do you feel? We're not ill-liked, we're just regulated everywhere. It's not that people don't like us. There's a bad elements about this sector, but we are progressing. Well, traditionally, France had a planning policy. This tradition has disappeared, but it enabled the development of motorway infrastructures, railway infrastructures, a lot of networks. If SFR and France Telecom became giants, it's due to the fact that there used to be a policy for that. The issue that will take place for the digital technologies and the cryptocurrencies is, first of all, the national element. And if you go to if you look at microprocessors, we talk about mining farms, calculation farms, where are they located? And another point is the electricity and the energy consumption. So because of all that, we'll very soon end up with a question of who controls what. Very funny example, very strange example. A company called Fireblock, extraordinary at technological level, but it's an emanation of the 8200, which is an emanation of the Israeli army. So if you're the American, the U.S. regulator, there are privileged relationships with Israel, so no problem. But if you're a regulatory authority in Hong Kong or in Frankfurt, how do you envisage this connection? And which is why we need to have European champions. We're lucky enough to have Ledger in France, which is a French unicorn in terms of cybersecurity. We need more, but first of all, we should encourage talents to stay, not to leave, and we would need to have the public policies to support these industries. Xavier Niel worked on the cloud without success, and others have done so. Okay, Philippe Maillard, you wanted to react, and Mathieu, do you feel supported, or do you feel big enough to react? So first of all, I wanted to answer your question. If we look at a topic which is very much of the essence, the duration for relocating a plant, when we talk about reindustrialization, we see that in France we need 3, 4, 5, 6 years for a plant to be set up. And when you look at the files, it means that we manage about a third of the classified installations in France. What we forget is the level of demand that we have created collectively in terms of biodiversity, environment, standards, and you have to be able to support that, because we made these choices because they represented a will of a desire of our society. But when you look at the time it takes, you remember you need fauna, flora carried out, surveys carried over a year. And there used to be a time when this didn't happen. It's the syndrome of the yellow and green toad that is crossing the sector. Well, what I'm saying is that it's a demand of the public authorities, and today it may delay the setting up of a new plant. But if you take care of a file correctly, you can set up a plant in 2-3 years by respecting the regulations. So it is also possible to do it in 2-3 years and to make the process a bit more agile for the reindustrialization without necessarily entering into complicated discussions to know if you have to relax the law. Yes, it's becoming complicating because we are constantly having new laws to try and make things shorter. I wanted to seize the opportunity of having with us someone who's both French and German. Don't you think there's a cultural issue? Because the French, they love the industry, but not when a plant opens close to their home or within 10 or 100, even 100 kilometers of their home. Don't you think there's a cultural issue? Some people export because they always did so, the Dutch, the Germans, and others used to be more of a rural population. Do you feel that? What I've felt over the past 50 years, France has become deindustrialized. So my generation and the generations before, so the closing of plants. So this meant a lot of unemployment, and there were a lot of negative connotation with the industry. And it's absolutely necessary to reverse this perception. And this is what's happening in France. Politics are giving priority to this topic. There's a lot of initiatives along these lines. We need more women in the industry, for example, because nothing works without talent. France has created a new collective movement to attract women to the industry with mentoring, etc. So we have to change the image of the industry and the role of SMEs, the famous Mittelstand. And this was part of the daily life of the Germans and no longer of the French. So, Mathieu, did you want to react to the role of the public authorities? Did you need them? You created an industrial project from scratch with the new technologies. It's an industrial startup company. Did you get any support? Did you need the support? Well, first of all, if you want to innovate, you must be able to take risks and you must be brave or have some courage. And more, the French government is really playing according to the rules of the game and betting on the industry of the future. So if you don't mind, I'm going to talk in a positive manner. In France, you have something called research tax system. So you can recover up to 43% of your research. A while ago, the companies used to develop in other countries and they developed the research here, but they scaled up in US or in Asia. Now they scale up here. If you talk about the BPI, if you talk about France 2030, we have a lot of systems that enable us to develop our production units in France. So this is important. Things are changing, and it's important to realize that. Personally, I left France. I lived between France and other countries, but we have to change this mentality. We have to change the stereotypes when people say building a plant in France is not possible. It's not true. France is becoming more and more competitive at global level. So you work in tens of countries. It's interesting to hear about your vision. You are an expert. You're at the very core of industrial and technological innovation. Are there major differences? Is anything happening in France above and beyond the political speeches? Because there is a consensus and it's very difficult to find someone who doesn't talk about having some sovereignty. It's true that the speeches as to that have been reversed. In real terms, how do things happen when you have to advise a client as to whether they should open a plant in France or Germany? It probably happens. Are we really more and more competitive? Yes, absolutely. For the past few years, we have seen an acceleration of the possibilities with new procedures and a large demand. But when we talk to our clients, the main topic is AI, generative AI, and the context around that. The state can very strongly accelerate industries, but it can also hinder it with overly constraining and limiting standards. Why is generative AI absolutely fascinating? Let me give you an example. I was at Google's in California 3 weeks ago. They have the best tools in the world. They have set up these tools at a large scale and gained about 20% productivity, even though they had already the best team in the world. In the chemical or computer industry, you can talk about at least 20% of improvement in productivity. But where it's fascinating is for the industry and the R&D teams. Some major industries, especially in the US, have deployed these, have scaled up the use of these new tools and gained up to 40% productivity. So you can imagine if you come out with a molecule or a car 40% faster than your competitors, it's great. Do you think it's not the case in France? Well, I co-signed an article last weekend. There are some projects at European level which are being built with an approach, a precautionary approach, which may sound legitimate, but which is dangerous for companies, and they may thinking, okay, I'm going to create my AI company abroad because then I can have access to talents and to tomorrow's technology. There's really we have to encourage sovereignty and the relocation of industry. Maya, I don't know if it's true. It might be interesting to hear your opinion. Do you think there's a barrier in Europe because we had the GDPR, which was a problem for data processing? Very often we are trying to be nice people and we're a bit naive as compared to the others. Do you think this is true? Is it an explanation to our lagging behind? No, it's not an explanation. About regulations up till now, the economists felt that the digital systems should not be regulated because it was a novelty and changes had to take place by themselves. 4 or 5 years ago, there was a change of vision because control these huge digital systems were becoming important. So we introduced the DSA and DMA directives that are what is called the gatekeeper directives, controlling access to market. But now there's a true political stake there. We have to balance privacy, the respect for your privacy, your private data on the one hand. These are legal elements, because citizens must be protected. And the other thing is innovation. We must make sure that the data are open and exchangeable because they are the very basis of the economic system now. So there's a challenge to balance these two elements, protecting the data while introducing innovations linked to these data. I'm not sure I understood where we stand as far as AI is concerned. Regulators try to follow the technologies. How do you envisage the evolution of things? Because we were talking about productivity gains, there's a fear of loss of jobs in the service industry, the so-called white collars, because we know that these will be more impacted. So the political authorities have to decide on these regulations. What is your position about things? Some people have explained their position in the US, in Europe, not always the same, in fact. Well, it's very interesting because before generative AI, we used to say digital things are nice, they're changing our life, but we've been hearing about threats to jobs, but we aren't seeing this in practice. We heard about the polarization of work, saying that the digital technologies were a threat to people with intermediate competencies, but not not threatening the highly qualified or the very little qualified. In fact, generative AI have changed things totally. First of all, because there's a hope of gain of productivity, which is a true revolution now, but there's also a concern for a large part of our employees, even the highly qualified ones. I saw research saying that the most threatened jobs were the legal jobs, people who are super qualified. But also for health, there's another panel on health. With predictive medicine, a lot of jobs are being threatened. So what will regulatory authorities do? They have to arbitrate between jobs and technological progress. Well, I feel the discussion we should have is about distribution and redistribution. The true issue is not really jobs, but the productivity gains. So if this impacts the equity holders, it's not going to work. So we have to see how the gains of these generative AI are being redistributed. I guess in your company, for example, some jobs can be threatened or at risk. How is your job going to evolve? Well, it's a creative destruction. So what we do better and faster will enable us to gain some markets with the same teams, and therefore to serve more clients with the same teams. Apart from that, at the same time, there are new jobs being created in the computer services because a lot of people will realize that large language models, LLMs, will be in great numbers, so we'll need to replace one by the other to be always at the top. We will need some specialists for the interface. We'll need people to check the quality of responses, the parameters. If I take my own example, I was trying to recruit someone the other day. Usually, I talk to my HR manager. I give him or her the profile. We discuss for 2 or 3 hours. There, I used our own generative AI robot that we have at Initum, and I did this on my mobile phone for 1 minute. So I'm not saying that this is going to disappear, but we'll have more time for other tasks that have an added value or will lead to a capital gain. So we can't close now, but I would like to turn to my neighbor, Jean-Luc Robert. He's the best informed man in the world, better than Christine Lagarde, because in his cloud he has the cash situation of thousands of companies. So I'm going to try and pick his brain to get some information about the situation. Do companies have cash? There's a lot of investments. We were talking about the 4 billion invested by Siemens every year. A lot of money will have to be invested in the new technological revolution. I guess you're not allowed to centralize everything or to talk about everything, but if you look at things in real time, what can you tell us? We don't see the data of the companies, but we see the volumes that are being exchanged. Several trillions of cash are being exchanged on the platform. And our main issue is the issue of data and sovereignty. And the main issue in the evolution of the cloud is that. So our data are anonymous, so you can't see them, but we see that there's an acceleration of the cash flows and things are picking up speed. So it means that the economic activity is supported. So everything is okay. We can continue increasing the interest rates. Well, I guess a time will come when there are other ways of funding companies, and this will lead to other sources of potential funding. I would like to leave the last word to Mathieu Flamini. I believe you're from Marseille. You're not far away from here. I'd like to have your opinion about reindustrialization of neighborhoods. We've heard that a lot. I'd like to know where your company is located. Do you really believe that we can rebuild a French industry? Will there be other Flaminis cropping up everywhere? And as we only have 2 minutes left, I'll let you conclude maybe. Well, 2 or 3 words as to what you were saying earlier about the regulator. I don't think we are facing the first industrial revolution. We've faced others, and we managed to reinvent our world. Second thing, we say that 85% of the jobs in 2030 are not yet known. So the best way to defend yourself is always to attack first. And one thing which is very important for the industry, it's important for the that the regulators should try to protect the citizens and the environment. For example, for plastics, there's a new law that says that by 2030, for all plastic objects, you must have at least 30% of recycled plastic. Nowadays, in the fuel you use for your cars, about 14% is biofuel. So this is generating the new industries. Yes, it's a way of reinventing our industry. And to finish, we're presently discussing with the French government and the teams in the region to help people relocate in the south and to help relocate in the south, because it's a territory that has a huge potential, and we hope we can very soon take part in this economic movement. Well, thank you all for your patience, and it was